Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Hidden Gems. Today I will play Wakatipu by Gareth Farr. Gareth Farr is a composer from New Zealand, and I'll talk to him shortly about what does the title Wakatipu mean, and also the Maori, that is a native New Zealand legend that inspired this piece. But first I'll play it. You'll hear it starts very mysteriously, but then it turns into quite a diabolical and virtuosic dance. So here's the piece. This is Wakatipu by Gareth Farr. I hope you'll enjoy it. for listening. I'll play the piece again after the interview with Gareth Farr, which we'll hear right now. Thanks. And I feel really fortunate to have the composer of Wakatipu here with me today. This is Gareth Farr. I was trying to pronounce it more or less New Zealand way, Farr. And he's in Wellington, New Zealand. Right. Thank you so much for joining.
Hi, really lovely. I'm very happy to be here. Good to meet you.
Oh, you too. And I was wondering first if you could tell us a little bit about the background of the piece, both sort of in our world, how did it come to be composed, and a little bit about the story behind the piece, which is really beautiful.
Sure. Well, I was commissioned by the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra up north from where I am, because they are in charge of getting a composer to write the test piece for the International Violin Competition in New Zealand. And it is very international, like people from all over the world entered it and came to New Zealand. All of the contestants had to learn it as the contemporary piece, in addition to their repertoire, whatever that may be. And my immediate response was, okay, great. What is the brief? And they said, make it as hard as possible, as difficult as possible. And I was like, oh, okay, it's great. So I started writing it, and I consulted with a few violinist colleagues, and Justine Cormack, who was a member of the New Zealand Trio at the time. She looked at it and she said, yeah, I can get around that. I reckon you should put some of it up the octave, at least. I was like, okay, whoop. So it was a real learning experience of how difficult. Well, also because it's a test piece and it's a competition and it has to be difficult. So that was the nuts and bolts of the commission. But then I thought, well, the piece is in the down south in New Zealand, in Queenstown, which is a real, like, people who visit New Zealand have to go to Queenstown because there's a lot of skiing in winter, beautiful sort of snow-capped mountains, astonishing landscape, and it's right on the edge of Lake Wakatipu, which has a fantastic Maori native New Zealand legend that because the lake, and no one knows really why this happens, but the lake slightly rises and falls. It has a tide, but lakes aren't supposed to have tides, so no one really knows why this happens. And the legend is that a great water monster abducted a beautiful woman and her lover, found him and set him on fire and burnt him. And the taniwha, which is what we call a water monster, burnt and made the lake. And his heartbeat is what makes the lake rise and fall, which I think is the most wonderful legend. So I sort of based it on that, knowing that all of these violinists from around the world were sort of descending on Queenstown, never having experienced New Zealand at all, whatever language they all spoke, and I thought this would be a good way of introducing them to Maori culture, even though the piece itself doesn't really relate to anything to do with Maori music. I do that in other ways.
Maybe this is getting too literal, but I would assume.
Oh no, please do.
I would assume that this.
Hey, bring the violin out.
That this is the beating heart, right?
Yeah.
And
down.
That's right.
Yeah. I could sing it. You could play it. can't sing it.
That's okay. But yeah, the rhythms are really quite intricate. But interestingly, you say they're not from the region and not Maori.
I do get asked fairly often what the direct contact with Maori music is in in my composition, and it is quite literal. If I have the inspiration of writing a piece that is based on Maori music, I work with Maori musicians.
Mm-hmm.
As simple as that. As simple as that. And I have a huge amount of work that I've worked with Maori singers, um, uh, Maori instruments are mostly wind instruments. They're called taonga puoro, that's the name for the instruments. And I work with specialists who sing or who play taonga puoro, or the kapahaka is the name for the group, like a big ensemble of vocalists. And that's the way I work with that, because I feel it slightly disingenuous to do something in a violin piece or a piano piece or an orchestral piece that is like Maori music.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I do that? I just do it directly is the best way for me. But inevitably, any composer subconsciously reflects every single thing that they've experienced in their lives. So, mostly, sonic. And the fact that I'm a percussionist sort of resounds, well, literally, with South Pacific music, because there's a lot of percussion music in this part of the world. Talking about the actual instruments, there's an instrument called a koawo, which is usually made of wood, and it's a flute of sorts. It's cross blown. I have a piece called He Poro Aki, which means farewell.
Yes, I read that you're also very much interested in gamelan
Yeah.
music. Yeah, this is all Very interesting.
Yeah, I own a set of Balinese gamelan instruments, gamelan gong kabiar, and I went to there's been a Javanese gamelan since in Wellington since about 1970. So it's been here for a very long time. It's a real established part, and it was a gift to the university in Wellington from the Indonesian embassy way back then. And I loved it. I started playing it and I just thought, wow, this is so cool. And of course, immediately all of my compositions sounded exactly like gamelan. You know, and in the same way as that what I was saying about Maori music in my composition. Eventually I was like, Gareth, everything you do sounds like gamelan. Where's Gareth's voice? So I had to sort of move on from that. And I'm glad because, again, it's subconscious. Sometimes little gamelan things pop out in my music. I think in this piece too. That's really Balinese. That's quite a sort of a Balinese sound, rhythm. But I went to Bali with my teacher and I got on the back of his motorcycle, which is a terrifying concept in Bali. I was holding onto him like this, and we looked at lots and lots of different instruments, and we finally found the right one. And I shipped it back to New Zealand, and now we have a Balinese ensemble in Wellington, which is really exciting because we perform and rehearse quite regularly.
Back to Wakatipu.
Yeah.
This is a random question. The scale, that the entire piece has this weird.
Da, 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 da. Yeah.
This...
Yeah. Stacked minor thirds, and I'm a little I think because it's octatonic basically. It's bum, 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 bum. Or is it hexatonic? Wait a minute. Yeah, it's hexatonic, not octatonic. But you can see my Messiaen influence there. Because I just, on the one hand, I like to sort of, my teacher was, sorry, I'm interrupting myself, but my teacher was Chris Rouse at Eastman, and I adored him. He died a couple of years ago, which was, way too soon. That man wrote some astonishing music, and he would write and just put everything out there. There's no mathematical concept. It's just notes and inspiration and shapes and wonderful. And I want to do that, but there's a mathematical part of my brain that won't let me be as completely abandoned as he does. And so I'm always in two minds as whether to stick with a particular scale, which I did. It's not even a scale; it's like a chord, and it appeals to me so much. So I'm always sort of slightly over the line one way or the other. But this piece, I stuck to it all the way through. I stuck to that hexatonic stacked minor thirds scale because I love the sound of it.
I was actually wondering, since I spent some time there these days. What was the experience like for you at Eastman?
I loved it. The fact that I was a foreign student made me slightly nervous that I would, and I knew that the school was hugely internationally famous, and students from all over the world came to Eastman, and I thought, oh my God, what am I going to be the worst in the class? And as it turned out, I wasn't. I actually did quite well. And so I sort of relaxed a little bit after the first year. But the first year was, but also, it's the first time I'd lived in an apartment building. first time I'd had to think about, oh God, I've got to pay rent every month. But it was my overseas experience. And New Zealanders are famous for travel, international travel, because we live in this tiny, tiny little country, 5 million people. It's tiny. And when we watch the evening news, we know that all of those things happen in the northern hemisphere. They happen in the world, and we're aware of that since we're children. So we always have this desire to travel and to find out what is this thing called the northern hemisphere. And so there are 5 million people here in New Zealand, but there are a huge amount of Kiwis, New Zealanders, around the world, and that's what we do. So it was my introduction to the rest of the world. Kia ora from New Zealand. Kia ora. It's Kiaora. So if you can, that's the New Zealand hello. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. And how do you say that in Hebrew?
Well, you can say shalom.
Sorry.
That's the easiest.
Okay. Kia ora and salam.
Thanks again to Gareth Farr for speaking with me. And now I'll play the piece again. I hope you'll enjoy it. Here it is, Wakatipu.